Hello, welcome, good afternoon, and namaste, everybody. I bow in reverence and with deep gratitude to those of you joining me in the room, to those of you joining me on Zoom, and to those of you listening to the recording afterward. Welcome to Living from the Heart, a Dharma talk about this incredible journey of 18 inches from the head to the heart, a journey which can take one moment or many lifetimes. And this week's talk is part 2 on the karmic path to love and liberation. If you weren't here for part 1, no need to worry. We'll be starting afresh, starting anew, just like we do every time we come to our meditation cushion and come to our yoga mat. We meet this moment completely fresh, completely new. This endlessly recreating itself present moment, of which no moment will happen exactly like this one. And we closed out the last talk by speaking about the suffering of the human condition. The first noble truth is that life contains suffering, that life as we normally live it contains suffering. There is big suffering and there is little suffering. And suffering, from the yogic and Buddhist perspectives, is a psychological issue. Suffering is any time things are not what we wish them to be. Suffering is any time we want things to be different than what they are currently. And we spend almost every waking moment of our day chasing after the things that we do want and running away from the things that we don't want. This is suffering, not being able to simply be still and feel at peace. And in this endless seeking, in this endless striving, we think that if only we could just rearrange the entire world to be perfect for our own wants and needs, then we can finally be happy. If only my job was like this, my relationship was like this, my life was like this, and my bank account was like this. If only these things happened in the world, then I could truly be at peace. The if only mind is the foundation of our suffering. And another consequence of thinking that the world should be catering to our own needs, and if it is not, we feel quite justified in our anger and frustration and annoyance with the world. And just as much as we try to rearrange the whole world to meet all of our endless desires, which will in turn create a lot of suffering for other people as we blindly seek after our own material wish fulfillment. Another consequence of this approach is that it makes us worry about our own decisions. We hesitate at every moment of our life whenever there is a big decision to make because we worry about whether or not we will make the right decision. If we think that certain external circumstances are necessary in order for us to feel a sense of peace and love and joy in our heart, then our attempts to change or manipulate our external circumstances will come with a certain hesitation, a certain fear around making the right decision, which we hope will lead to happiness, and fear around making the wrong decision, which will lead to further suffering. So we worry. Did I make the right decision? Did I choose the right job? Did I choose the right partner? Did I choose the right town to live in? Should I be living life in a different way than the one I am currently living? If we think that peace does not arise from within, we will continue to seek for peace without, and we will end up without. You probably know the famous quote: if you are anxious, you are living in the future. If you are depressed, you are living in the past. This is the consequence of putting so much emphasis on our own action and own decision making to make the right or wrong circumstances in the world. We look back and think, if I had chosen differently, my life would be very different than it is now. And such regret can turn into a deep depression, a deep lamenting about our current condition. Anxiety's fundamental question is, what might happen? So we have anxieties about the future, about what might happen in the future. And we have some anxiety about our decisions, which we know will somehow affect the future. A story for you. A laborer goes to the farmer and asks about a job. So the farmer gives him a big pile of wood to chop. After just a day, all the wood is chopped perfectly and set into neat piles. Surprised and impressed, the farmer sends him the next day to mend the fences around the farm. The laborer gets to work, and by the end of the day, sure enough, the entire fence is mended and aligned. Again, very impressed and worried he'd soon run out of work for the laborer to do, he tells him to sort the potatoes. The farmer tells the laborer to put the potatoes into 3 categories. First ones are the best ones that should go to the market. Second category are the ones that are too small and they should be processed, and the rest can all be planted. So by the end of the 3rd day, the laborer goes to the farmer and says, "That's it, I quit." And the farmer, quite surprised at his best laborer's decision to quit, says, "You can't quit. I need you. I've never had such a good laborer in my entire life. Why do you have a sudden desire and tendency to quit?" And the laborer goes, "Well, it was all fun to chop wood and mend fences, but this potato business is just decision after decision." So there are 2 fundamental lessons to this story. One is that we often struggle to make decisions. And afterwards, we wonder if we made the right decision. If we have to choose between which potato goes into which pile, not only will that decision give ourselves a certain mental fatigue and mental tiredness over constantly having to choose and weigh different pros and cons, understanding that if only we had more data and understanding to make the best decision. But of course, we will never have all the data and information that we need to make the absolute best decision that we can make. So as a result, after the decision is made, we wonder, what if I had made it differently? Did I make the right decision? And again, we have the anxieties about future decisions and depression about past decisions. But there's another key lesson. Why was it that mending fences and chopping wood did not have such a decision-making process? And the answer is that for certain activities in this world, we don't make decisions. There isn't that hesitation. There isn't that moment of feeling caught up. There is a moment where we find ourselves at flow, at harmony with the universe, where our decisions practically make themselves. It implies that there is a way of being in this world that doesn't require decision after decision. And this is what it is like to be fully in the present moment, to recognize that both past and future are illusions. There is a comic where a man is falling from the top of a skyscraper. While passing a window on the 13th floor, somebody asks him, "How are you doing?" To which the man replies, "So far, so good." This is what it means to be present. We're not anxious about our future circumstances, no matter how dire they may be. We can recognize that in this present moment, things are okay. The present moment is okay. So to be in the flow is to not feel like you are making decisions at all. We have totally lost that self-reflective consciousness that weighs pros and cons before moving forward with an action. And many of us at certain times in our life have probably felt this. If you ask anyone about a certain task in their life that totally involved them in the context of the task, they'll tell you that they forgot all about themselves. Whether you talk to chess players or dancers or mathematicians, they'll tell you about this incredible phenomena of the mind where we do become so focused that the doer simply disappears. And if there is no doer, there is no anxiety about what needs to get done and what is going to get done. There's a story of three monks and a rain barrel, one of my favorite stories, and there's so many different ways to tell it. In this story, monk number one walks by and sees an ant drowning in a rain barrel. And this monk thinks to himself, well, this is the way of life. Creatures live and creatures die. I shouldn't interfere. And he walks right on by. Monk number two walks by, sees the ant in the rain barrel, drowning, and says, if I save this ant's life, I will accumulate good karma and good merit in this life, and I will reap the rewards in my next life. So he scoops up the ant and sets it down on a rock and is quite pleased with himself after such a decision is made. The third monk rolls around, and the monk is walking step by step by step, feeling his feet on the earth, feeling the breath flow in and out of his body. And without even looking, his hand swoops down into the rain barrel, picks up the ant, sets it in a safe place, and continues walking without even thinking about it. Not action or no action, but non-action. I love non-words. When you hear the word non-judgment, non-attachment, non-action, this is that special middle way. This is the pathless path of walking through the gateless gate. We neither act for our own selfish interests in terms of saving the ant, nor do we not act by simply letting things be as they are. We find action in non-action. We find that woo way, that special middle way, where we are so aligned with the natural harmony of life that there is no doer. So it's important to recognize that the problem here, the source of our suffering, is our mind. It is not in the world. So the answer to our problems is to train the mind. As I mentioned last week, we'll be finding inspiration from two fundamental texts on the path of karma and the results that our actions offer us. And we have Shanti Devas, the way of the Bodhisattva, as well as the Bhagavad Gita. So verse 7.40 of Shanti Devas, the way of the Bodhisattva, says this: aspiration is the root of every virtue. Thus the Mighty One has said, an aspiration's root in turn is constant meditation on the fruits of action. Such profound words. Let us look at the first line. Aspiration is the root of every virtue. This is so important. When you hear the word aspiration, you can also think of the word intention. They are the same. They are ideals that we seek to live up to. Just as we sit on our meditation cushion and sit on our yoga mat, and we set intentions of love, unconditional love, limitless acceptance, ultimate peace, contentment. These are all aspirations that we seek. And Shantideva tells us that aspiration is the root of every virtue. Goodness does not come out of nothing, but it comes out of the intention, the aspiration to do good and to be a good person in this world. And where does aspiration come from? Shantideva answers this fundamental question himself. Aspiration's root, in turn, is constant meditation on the fruits of action. There you have it, everybody. Meditation on the fruits of action. This is the law of karma. It is a natural law about the universe. Just as we have the law of gravity, the law of relativity that applies to every aspect of life, from big to small. Gravity is there no matter what. So too, karma is a law of nature. It is there no matter what. And the law of karma says that we reap what we sow. And we must meditate on how our actions bear fruits. Constantly meditate on the fruits of our actions. Next sloka, Shantideva says this: the body's pains, anxieties of mind, are every fear and trepidation. Separation from the objects of our wanting, such is the harvest of our sinful deeds. Again, we have the metaphor, fruits of actions. All of our actions bear fruit. So what is the harvest of bad deeds? It is suffering. Even your body's pain, Shantideva says, even the pain in your neck, the tightness in your hip, this is the harvest of bad action. This is the harvest. This is the fruits of bad, unmindful action in this world. So too, Shantideva tells us about the suffering that is a psychological issue. It is caused by our samskaras, the deep impressions of the mind that are there from our habitual actions. And he says, anxieties of the mind, fear and trepidations of the mind. This is also the result of our karmic actions. This is also the fruit of our actions. And here's another line that requires a little bit of explication. Separation from the objects of our wanting. This is another source of suffering. When we don't get what we want, when we get separated from what we want, we also experience a lot of suffering. And Shantideva says even this, bad action will result with you not getting what you truly want in life. So it's important to recognize suffering is the result of our actions. How often our attempts to get what we want causes a lot of suffering in others and ourselves. So earlier in Sutra 7.28, Shantideva says this: merit is the true cause of the body's ease. While happiness of mind is brought about by training, what can sadden those who have compassion, who linger in samsara for the sake of all beings? so much wisdom to be found in these simple lines. First, we must recognize that the true cause of our body's ease is merit. It is good action. True cause of our body's ease is merit, the fortunate consequences of our wise and skillful actions. Good actions will bear positive fruits. We must constantly meditate on this truth. Secondly, happiness of mind is brought about by training. So this is key. This is mental training. Mental training is absolutely foundational to the spiritual path. Mental discipline is absolutely spiritual, absolutely essential to the spiritual path. This is so promising. We are told that life contains suffering, but we are also told that we can free ourselves from suffering through the appropriate mental training, through meditation, through dharana, dhyana, and samadhi. We can turn our life around to find joy and to find happiness. So Shantideva says that our mental well-being is the result not of outer pleasures, but of taming our mind. Calming our mind is the true source of happiness and contentment in this life. And finally, we have the path of the Bodhisattva, the path of the Jivan Mukti, the liberated being who has liberated themselves from their own suffering, but chosen to stay in this world out of a compassion for all sentient beings. This is the person that lingers in samsara for the sake of all beings. So this is the third cause of happiness, that nothing discourages those who choose to linger in samsara for the sake of being. So you might be asking, what is a good action? What is a bad action? And it's so important to recognize how much suffering we create by constantly going after what we want, what our limited egoic self wants. Let's say you buy the latest new phone, and the heavy metals in that phone were mined by children on the other side of the world and put together in a country with limited and lax labor laws, which is essentially slavery, to put your phone together just so you can have it to look at memes. Our desires, our trying to get what we want, causes a lot of suffering to other human beings. So, what is good? Unselfish action. Action for the benefit of others. Not going about our days only seeking after what we want and running away from the things that we want, but working for the benefit of all beings. Again, we can turn to Shantideva 8.129. All the joy the world contains has come through wishing happiness for others. All the misery the world contains has come through wanting pleasure for oneself. Say that again. This is strong words. All the joy the world contains has come through wishing happiness for others. All the misery the world contains has come through wanting pleasure for oneself. In fact, I was just reading a little article about Mark Zuckerberg's $350 million super yacht that was parked recently in San Diego. And I had such compassion for this person. I know it's very hard for us to have compassion for those who seem to have a lot of money and power. But think about the emptiness, the hole that somebody is trying to fulfill by accumulating so much money and power. Because the research clearly shows that if you want to be happy, make others happy. The science shows it. You can have an experiment yourself. Take two groups, give them some money, Tell one group to spend it on other people and tell the first group to spend it on themselves. And test after test shows the people that spend money on other people are the ones that end up happier. So here we have somebody who thought that the best use of $350 million is to buy himself a boat. Do you think that brought Mr. Zuckerberg a lot of happiness? Think about what good could have been created in the world, how many homes he could have bought for people that desperately need homes. And we can also imagine in the construction, in the accumulation of said resources, in order to create, manufacture, service, and support such a boat, it caused a lot of misery for others. So all the misery the world contains has come through wanting pleasure for oneself. So the Gita also says we must give up attachment to the results of our actions. This is the path of the karma yogi. The yogi who acts with total non-attachment to the results of our action and acts for the goodwill of others. Satish Kumar put it this way: the way of the Gita is the way of a spiritual warrior, a peace warrior, and an eco warrior. The Gita calls a karma yogi one who is engaged constantly for the upliftment and well-being of the deprived and dispossessed, but who acts without desiring the fruit of his or her own actions. The Gita says that as a tree does not eat its own fruit, and the river does not drink its own water, the karma yogi should not seek any benefit of his or her own action. And here we have the metaphor of fruit again. A tree offers its fruit to the world for the picking, for whatever ants or monkeys or humans or whatever creature happens upon the fruit of this beautiful tree, they get to eat it. And sure, you could say that the tree is just using creatures for the propagation of its own species, but we can still recognize that that single organism of the tree itself does not reap the benefits of the fruit it is producing. So too, may we give our positive action, our gifts to the world freely without expecting anything in return. The Bhagavad Gita reads this: the wise should act without attachment, intending to maintain the welfare of the world. Another story for you. This is a story involving two famous historical figures. And as I tell you this story, I might ask you, which one do you know more about? This is a story of when Swami Vivekananda met John D. Rockefeller. It was early 1894, and Swamiji was traveling around the United States giving lectures. He had become very popular after his famous speech at the Parliament of Religions. It was around the same time another American had amassed a lot of riches from the oil business. This was John D. Rockefeller, and he was known for his ruthlessness and single-minded pursuit for making money. In fact, he was known to be obsessed with his wealth and making profits that it had begun to affect his health. It was around then that he learned of the wonderful and extraordinary Hindu monk staying in the house of one of his business colleagues in Chicago. Rockefeller was invited many times by his friend, but he refused the invitation. One day, although he did not want to meet the Swamiji, he was pushed to do so by an impulse and went directly to the house of his friend, brushing aside the butler, saying that he wanted to meet the Hindu monk. The butler ushered him into the living room and told him to wait. But not wanting to be announced, Rockefeller entered into Swamiji's adjoining study room and was much surprised to see Swamiji behind the writing table, not even lifting his eyes to see who has entered. After a while, in a quiet voice, Swamiji, who had not seen Rockefeller even once, talked to Rockefeller of his innermost secrets and anxieties. He talked of things which even his closest friends and relatives would not have known. It seemed miraculous, almost supernatural to Rockefeller. "How do you know all this? Who has taught this to you? He burst out. Swamiji looked at him with a quiet, calm smile on his lips, as if a child standing before him had asked a foolish question. Swamiji said this: forget the past, become happy again, build up your health, do not dwell on your own sorrows, transmute your emotions into some form of creative external expression. Your spiritual health requires it. You are only a channel for God's money that you have accumulated, and it is your duty to do good to the world. God has given you all his wealth in order that you may get an opportunity to serve him and his starving millions of children. On hearing this, Rockefeller was annoyed that anyone dared talk to him in that manner. He left the room in irritation, not even saying goodbye. But after a week, again without being announced, he entered Swamiji's study and, finding him the same as before, threw on his desk a paper which told of his plans to donate an enormous sum of money towards financing a public institution. Well, there you are, Swami, Rockefeller said. You must be so satisfied now, and you can thank me for it. Swamiji did not even lift his eyes, did not move for a time. Then, taking the paper, he quietly read it and said, "It is for you to thank me." And that was Rockefeller's first large donation to public welfare. And that was how the activities of the Rockefeller Foundation started. Personally, I can't believe I only recently heard of this story, heard of this incredible meeting between the East and the West. And here we see two different value systems collide. First, we have Swamiji in his studying, practicing the Jnana path, the path of knowledge, the path of mental discipline. And Swamiji knows the lessons of the Gita. Swamiji knows that wise men act for the welfare of the world. And so, too, a common metaphor is a person who accumulates wealth is no better than a thief. And in this meeting of East and West, we have Rockefeller, a dragon hoarding gold, whose heart is totally transformed. But in this initial meeting, he did it out of spite. He lays the paper down and says, "See, aren't you happy now?" Swamiji says, "You should be thanking me." The ability to give to others, to act for the welfare and well-being of others is a gift. It is our true source of happiness. And as you might know, this was in Chicago, and Rockefeller helped to start the University of Chicago, a university I personally have spent some time at. So I still can't believe I never heard of this story and this meeting. You can also see a little bit of the embellishment of the yogic path. Here we have Swamiji demonstrating his cities, his magical powers of being able to know the deepest secrets of Rockefeller. And Rockefeller opening up an academic institution reminds me of another story of the Buddha, where the Buddha was asked, "What do you know of miracles?" Because after all, the yogic texts are full of miracles, full of great powers and cities that an enlightened being suddenly becomes capable of. And the Buddha replied, "To me, the greatest miracle is education. The greatest miracle is teaching, our human ability to teach things to other human beings." This is why, after the dawn of the Buddha's enlightenment, he spent the rest of his life teaching. Teaching is such a gift. Education is such a gift. Being able to learn and to grow and to expand our mind to new levels of understanding is a gift. So even Rockefeller's action of creating an academic institution fostered the miracle of education. And his work in turn has inspired many other rich people to also start their own foundations to do positive work in the world. And it reminds me of the quote again by the Buddha. The fragrance of flowers drifts with the wind as sandalwood, jasmine, or lavender. But the fragrance of good actions goes further than the wind, encompasses the world, and even goes to the heavens. And this, my friends, brings us to who you are. Because in this taming and calming of the mind, and opening of the heart, and acting for the goodness of all beings everywhere, in giving up wanting, we discover the truth of who we are. We think that when we really desire something and we work really hard to getting that thing, we feel a sense of peace and happiness because we have attained that thing. But you have to ask yourself, how long does it last? When you get the house or the car or the dessert that you've wanted for a really long time, how long does your happiness last? And you also might ask yourself, is this feeling you feel inside of you a result of attainment or the ending of all desire? Because this is the path we learn from yoga, that by releasing all desire, our true self manifests. That yoga is the state of needing nothing. Yoga is true desirelessness. And when we are truly devoid of desire, we find nothing but peace, love, and joy, because peace, love, and joy is who we are. Our true nature is finally being revealed. You might imagine 3 buckets of water. Bucket number 1 is being stirred. It is agitated. Bucket number 2 is full of mud. And bucket number 3 is clear. And the sun is shining on these buckets. In the first bucket, you can barely see the sun. It's jagged. It's broken up. It's divided into all the little swirls in the water. In bucket number 2, it is quite dull. It is obscured. But in bucket number 3, it is clearly shining and clearly vibrant. This is the lesson of tamas, rajas, and sattva. We only find our true self. We only find the illumination of the sun in the sattvic, clear state. When our mind is agitated, the sun is obscured. When the mind is dull and full of tamas, the sun is obscured. The clear bucket of water does reflect the sun beautifully, and it points us to our true nature, which is the sun, which is always illuminating. Love is always here. Happiness is always here. Joy is always here. It's always inside of you. But like the sun, it's always shining, but sometimes it's more obscured than other times. Sometimes there are big gray clouds in the way, but the gray clouds do not affect the sun. The mud in the bucket of water does not affect the sun. So your true nature is being revealed when we find the path of letting go of all desire for our own egoic selves, of working to be for the benefit of all beings. There's a reason that monk, as he passed the rain barrel without even thinking about it, saved the ant, because our true nature is fundamentally good. And our yogic path is one of removing the obscurations of our true nature. Zen Master Dogen says this: delusion is seeing all things from the perspective of self. Enlightenment is seeing the self from the perspective of the myriad things of the universe. When we finally let go of our own egoic desires, seeing things from our own point of view, only seeking to get what we want, and we seek to work for the benefit of all beings, we take on the perspective of all beings. We find the perspective of the myriad of things in the universe. Swami Satchidananda says this: nothing can bring you lasting happiness, but you have it already until you disturb it. A $350 million yacht will not bring you lasting happiness. You might experience it for just a glimpse because in that moment of finally getting what you want, you have released all desire. But because you have the deep samskara of wanting, because you've cultivated such a wanting, habitually wanting mind, it's not too long before the wanting comes back. So we find the sun that is always illuminating. We find the happiness that is always there without disturbing it. And this puts us on the perspective of the divine, right? When you think about the perspective of all things, the perspective that wants the good for everyone. This is the divine perspective. This is the God perspective. God wants us to be happy. God wants you to be happy. God wants all the creatures of this earth to be happy. Why did God create the universe? Why did God forget himself to become the multiplicity of all things? In order to experience joy and happiness in a myriad of ways. And you can take this perspective. You can see yourself as the divine. As Saint Teresa of Avila says, all the way to heaven is heaven. This path that you are on, this is the path of the divine. This is the path of Sat Chit Ananda, understanding the truth of your consciousness as one of bliss. Ananda, nothing but bliss. Bliss is who you are. This is our Leela. This is our dance, this dance of life. This is the divine dance that we all find ourselves in. A dance is meant to be enjoyed. It is meant to be explored. It is meant to be manifested and expressed in every ounce of your being. Friends, you are the love. And you get there through this path of karma, through this path of selfless service, selfless action, selfless, because there isn't even a self. There isn't even a small, limited, lowercase s self. We are here to rest in the divine self, the Atman that is the Brahman in everything. So that's all the time we have for today. I'm glad we finally got to the fundamental lesson of it all, that we are here to find the ultimate freedom and the ultimate love, to liberate ourselves from the bondage of our own karmic conditioning, to burn away all of our karma, to find freedom. And we release our karma by acting for the benefit of all, for the welfare of all. The true path to lasting happiness, to Ananda. Nothing in this external world will give you that lasting feeling of internal bliss because you have it already. And all you have to do is stop disturbing it. So, with that, let us stop disturbing our own happiness, peace, and contentment. Straighten the spine, relax the shoulders, and rest calm, still, and at peace. Release any desire to change, improve, or modify things as they are. Thomas Merton says, This life is totally transparent, and the divine is shining through it all the time. And it is our care, our love for one another, that makes it so transparent. See the love in you as the love in all. See the divine shining through everything, including you, to touch us all. Act for the benefit of all beings. Become the Jiva Mukti, the liberated being. Become the Bodhisattva, cultivating bodhicitta, the vast universal altruism, the love that shines on everything like the sun. Namaste.